From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris here on a Tuesday, and we have a good show on tap for you. I think an interesting one where, as always, you'll be invited to join in the conversation if you want to call in or sit back and listen. We're going to be talking this morning about domestic terrorism to a degree, the large overall picture of what's happening in this country and why, with regard most recently to that mass shooting in Buffalo, New York, and the idea of motive behind it and why they think this individual did the shooting, with regard to replacement theory and the like, and what is replacement theory and how we deal with that in this country. And we have a wonderful expert on this morning to talk about that, kind of walk us through it, explain it, and answer some of the questions. With us this morning is a professor of criminal justice over at MTSU, Lynda Williams. It's good to have you on, Professor Williams. And it's interesting, I was telling her before the show how what a wonderful resource she will be for us here, coming back to her alma mater at MTSU because of her background. Former U.S. Secret Service Deputy Assistant Director, retiring after some 29 years there. And here she is in our own backyard. It's wonderful to have you on this morning, Professor. And I thought we'd start a little bit with, can you tell us a little about your career with the Secret Service and what the Secret Service deals with and how it plays out with what we're talking about this morning?
Well, good morning, Nick, and thank you for having me. I'm very proud to return to my alma mater, and I've been here in this capacity for the last 5 years. I started my career with the Secret Service back in 1988. I transitioned from an officer, transition over to a special agent some years later with a totality of almost 30 years. The core investigation, the mission of the Secret Service is investigation and protection. Of course, you know who we protect, the president and any other designee. But the Secret Service was founded under the Department that investigates, suppress counterfeit in our currency during the Civil War and after the Civil War. It was not till 1901 that we came on with the protective mission. So today, our investigations still range for anything that deal with the financial currency of the United States, anything deal with the financial infrastructure. And now it has led over into identity theft and other things that are related to those issues.
All right, so as we watched what happened in Buffalo, New York, and then, as we're talking about what the motive was behind this, the 18-year-old male accused of killing the 10 people there, the idea of replacement theory. I assume, obviously, that was part of what you looked at, dealt with, and observed. What were your thoughts when you heard the motive possibly behind what happened there in Buffalo?
First of all, it was a sad and tragic event. Anytime innocent lives are taken and lost, it's a tragic. And trying to understand things so that we don't repeat them, it's very important that we stop and examine it. I know there's a lot of propaganda about this replacement theory. I think that's just a social phenomenon just to explain, people's discomfort, the push of white supremacy. We realize that the United States is a country of transition based on the influx of legal immigrants, the fertility and the morality rate of our country. And so the demographics will forever be in transit and change.
So, all right, the theory, and you correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, in simple terms, I was doing some research on replacement theory and what it basically means. A conspiracy theory that states that non-white individuals are being brought into the United States and other Western countries to replace white voters to achieve a political agenda. It sounds to me like people that believe that crap are paranoid.
Tomato, we can say anything that we want to, and all this misinformation to prove or support our thinking, but it is just garbage. Think about it. The Statue of Liberty, what it represents many, many years ago, it's supposed to be freedom and justice. You know, even inscribed on the base of the Statue of Liberty, I paraphrase, they say, bring us your tired and so that, you know, the masses can find and breathe freedom. You know, and when we think that, you know, all the liberties that we have, but it's not to suppress any individual or any demographic or any group of people. So, you know, that's just more propaganda, some more misinformation. But we realize that there's consequences of everything, and the statistics are that if we have an influx of different nationalities, origins, and culture, that of course that is going to change the demographics and the culture of our United States. But that's what it's based on, our individual freedom.
Sure. And so how would the Secret Service, when they view this, you know, combat, individuals that get indoctrinated, where they're saying, like, you know, there's a decrease in white birth rates and that equates to genocide if numbers like that bear out, and, you know, whatever this 18-year-old was reading or finding, how does the Secret Service and other law enforcement prepare and combat that?
So I'm glad you said it, because I was going to bring it up. It's no more than genocide that you're trying to get rid of or rid a certain racial group or epithet of our country because you don't like them, that you don't understand it. And Secret Service is just like any organization, that we have to be take cognizant of this phenomena that's going on. Now, when it deals with terrorist threats and things of a terrorist nature, that comes under the jurisdiction of the FBI. But a lot of times investigations have a way of merging over to other agencies because we work collaterally on these things. So it's just another dynamic that we have to be attuned to as investigations unfold, and even as we deal with, mental illness and those individuals that might even come and present a threat to the president or any of the protectees of the Secret Service.
You know, one thing I neglected to mention when introducing you, you are the former, just recently stepped down as the 43rd president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and you were telling me that you basically presided in that position during, some period of real unrest, including, the incident with George Floyd and more. Yeah, talk a little bit about that. The race involvement issues that happen coming out of things like George Floyd and so many of these other types of cases.
Absolutely. Last year, I stepped down as the national president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE. And NOBLE was created in 1976, even during a tumultuous time in our country when we were still dealing with some of the things that we are dealing with today. We just didn't call it replacement theory, but those struggles still exist. When I came into my presidency shortly after George Floyd, we know our country was in turmoil. And so as a leader, you have to ride the wave in which you come upon. And one of the things with the disparities that were going on in our countries and the outcry and the battle cry about police reform, we have to go to the core of it. And the bottom line is, as we serve, Noble's creed is that we serve justice by action. That means being accountable to the things in our society. And even though Noble started out in 1976 as an African-American law enforcement organization, today our membership exceeds over 4,000 from every walk of law enforcement, every nationality, every race, because we realize that this is a human problem. And as we came into that summer after George Floyd, it put our whole country on full blast. The social injustice, the racial disparities, the difference in our criminal justice system, how it treats one segment of our country, our population versus another. And so all of this comes to where we are today. If we don't stop, if we don't learn from what we have already done and what we've already experienced, those things have a way of replaying themselves. I use my platform to speak against that, to know that we have to acknowledge, you have to acknowledge there's a problem before we can resolve it. And racism is, as I stated that time and as I repeat today, racism is American as apple pie, and it is woven in every facet of our country. So we have to acknowledge that these problems exist so that we can find a common thread and move forward. But if we deny it, as it's being denied now, that's why we see these same episodes play over and over. And then we put in the threat of terrorism, domestic terrorism, that only exacerbates this very issue.
All right, yeah, we've laid it out, and I think the big picture there, and yeah, which it does, it makes the situation worse. We're going to take a break, Professor. When we come back, we'll get into some more specifics, you know, maybe even stemming out of George Floyd, some of the approaches that law enforcement are taking, and then more into, you know, terrorism and what can be done about it domestically. We'll take a break, be back with our fine guest right after this. Stay with us.